Welcome to Hacking Music. I'm your host, John Pisciotta. The goal of this podcast is to break off a piece of the hacking music training we use and train artists in every day to master the best of what other headliner artists have already figured out so that you can unlock your potential. Additionally, we interview world-class artists and entrepreneurs, doers and thinkers so that you can better analyze your problems, seize your opportunities, and master your decision-making and execution. Every episode is packed with training, lessons, and force multipliers that never expire. And if you're listening to this, you're missing out. If you'd like members-only training and exclusive content, you can join at hacking-music.com. Check out the show notes for a link. The monthly call-in. I am so excited about our guest today. His name is Michael Drexler. He's led teams at Warner. He's led teams at BMI and Sony. He's just seen a lot of pieces of the puzzle. He's kind of a whole brain person. He's a musician on one side of the brain, and then he's an executive on the other side of the brain. So I was really excited to introduce Michael to our community, have a conversation with him. We're going to hit on a few topics. With that, Michael, welcome aboard.
Thank you, John, for having me. Appreciate it. It's been a minute since we last spoke.
It has.
We last met in person in Nashville. I think it was it a Chinese restaurant or somewhere in
it may have been a Thai.
Vanderbilt area.
Thai. I'm thinking it was Thai, but who knows? It was 10 years ago. Yeah. Good to see you.
Yep.
So, Michael, you have seen a lot of different pieces of the music marketplace. Tell us your journey. How'd you get here today? How'd you get to where you are?
Well, good afternoon, everybody, or evening, or wherever you are. Well, I've been in music all my life, pretty much, and without dating myself. I started out as a recording artist at a very young age, 1980s, believe it or not.
Yeah. Back
in Germany, Europe. I was on television, got a record deal, smelled the, crazy industry. I wanted to be in that industry and have been in it ever since. After that, I was a producer, engineer for about 10 years, working for Sony Music Studios when it still existed. Most of those studios don't exist anymore, unfortunately. Worked for Sterling Sound, worked for BMG Studios, and pretty amazing releases, and got a couple of Grammy nominations, and all the way up to 2000, really, when, of course, as we know, Napster came along. And that's when kind of the demise started, or the kind of product cycle came to an end, right? Of everybody buying their entire catalog again as in CD format, right, when they already had vinyl at the time. And so, it coincided with 9/11, Napster, and release schedules being dropped like crazy, and it was kind of a perfect storm, right? So that's when I felt I don't want to really be on that side of the business, or at least I don't want to have to make a living being on that side of the business.
On the recorded engineering
on the engineering side, even though I was in a pretty safe spot as a mastering engineer, but I felt like this is not gonna end well. And so I decided to go back to business school, got my MBA, and I wanted to really kind of make an impact on the business side of the music business. And it was kind of a very natural transition. I did an MBA internship at Sony Music, and that led into kind of a 6-year career of increasing responsibilities. Kind of the first decade, I would call it, of digital music. Remember,
and that was at the label side or the publishing?
That was on the label side. So I was part of the Global Digital Business Group, which was really kind of the I would say, the incubator of the recorded music industry. So we were looking at acquiring companies. Those were the crazy days of ringtones, ringback tones. We made acquisitions. We thought about becoming a wireless operator. All kinds of crazy stuff, where we acquired Gracenote at the time. We acquired IOTA, which later was folded into the Orchard on the distribution side. So a lot of kind of strategic, non-traditional deals, because frankly, when you look back at like the early days of digital, you had Apple Music, and you had kind of failed attempts by the labels of launching streaming services, Press Play, MusicNet, then of course Rhapsody and Napster 2.0, but it took about 10 years, frankly, for streaming to take off.
Yeah.
And that's because, we did a lot of market research because fans were not ready to give up ownership. Ownership was still very important. I own my catalog, even if it's just a digital version of it.
Yeah, the early iPod.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so that took almost a whole generation. But it was an amazing learning experience. It was kind of like a second MBA for me. A lot of private equity folks, super smart guys, VC people that kind of led the industry at the time. I lived through the joint venture. Remember, Sony and BMG got together. It was then called Sony BMG, and then Sony bought out BMG. And about 2010, I left when digital was just crossing the 50% mark in the United States. So 50% of revenues were digital at that point. And of course, now we're like way above 80%, 90%. Everything's now, of course, streaming. But then after Sony, I decided I want to go onto the publishing side and learn that business because it's a very different world really out there. So that's when I joined BMI and oversaw digital licensing, which is kind of a very different experience. Digital, as you probably know, is a smaller percentage when it comes to not just publishing, but when it comes to performing rights. Because you have television, you have radio, you have bars, restaurants, you have all kinds of revenue streams, international. So digital was less than 10% at the time on the publishing performance side. And we built that up to about 25%. It was a crazy growth trajectory. Dealing with Netflix, YouTube, Spotify, all the digital services that needed a license. So there was a lot of license negotiation, but also navigating kind of the world of tremendous BMI, for example. Same as ASCAP has a consent decree, which is a antitrust framework with the Department of Justice that goes back like 100 years in ASCAP's case. So very different worlds.
Let's talk about that for a second, Michael. When you say consent decree, for those of us that are new to this, and we may not be clear on the history, explain what the consent decree does and how it kind of boxes some people in.
So basically, it's an antitrust framework. So first of all, it goes back to ASCAP's early years when ASCAP was a monopoly, essentially, right? ASCAP was started more than 100 years ago. And as a monopoly, they could dictate prices. They could go to the radio industry, say, well, by the way, we don't think you're paying us enough. Why don't we quadruple the rates? and that's exactly what they were asking for. And that's when the Department of Justice said, stop, you can't just discriminate basically different players. So what the consent decree does, and it's kind of similar between ASCAP and BMI, is it prohibits the licensor, in that case BMI, from discriminating similarly situated players. So, for example, Apple Music, Spotify Music should be treated pretty much the same because they're in the same business, right? So they should get the same rates, they should get the same terms. License agreements have a lot more.
Almost blanket license.
It's a blanket license in the United States, exactly. So typically, they would charge a revenue share. Let's say BMI charges 2.5% to Spotify. They can't go to Apple and say we want 5%. Right?
Gotcha.
So that's an important piece. You cannot discriminate against similarly situated players. But it also governs what business BMI and ASCAP could actually be in. As you probably know, and the United States is pretty unique in that sense. They're only licensing public performance within the publishing copyright.
So no
license, no mechanicals. No mechanicals, exactly. And so those consent decrees govern that as well. in ASCAP's case, it's actually explicit that ASCAP may never license anything other than performance rights. So
Interesting.
specifically, no mechanicals. BMI's consent decree is actually silent, but they receive clarity that it's pretty much the same. They cannot do anything else. So it limits what they can do and economically how they can treat their licensees. And essentially what we're seeing then as a result is kind of a cap of fees. You can't really increase your fees like a GMR can. They don't have a consent decree like CSAC. You have kind of a cap where you can't go over and above. And that's why a lot of people would argue that the rates are artificially suppressed because of those consent decrees, right? So that's a direct result. But the regulation is not as harsh as we're seeing it with mechanicals, for example, where you have a statutory license framework,
and
meaning that the rates are predetermined by law, right, or by copyright judges, or you have a compulsory license where we cannot say no. It's not as harsh, but it's pretty limiting in terms of what those performing rights organizations can do, right? And interestingly, as you know, we have 4 of those in the United States, right? We have ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and GMR. ASCAP, BMI together, probably about 90% market share, and then 10% divided between GMR and CSAC. And those smaller ones, they don't actually have consent decrees in place.
Right.
So they're the same business, but they're completely unregulated.
Right. And there, Michael, even though the world has changed and it's no longer mechanical, physical product driven, ASCAP and BMI can't zig and zag and innovate in a sense, right? They're kind of built, they're kind of tied to a 1950s model, that worked in the 50s and it was great in the 50s, but in 2023, they're like, is that fair to say? Like they're kind of locked into history?
I mean, it's a slippery slope, right? They're innovating because they have to modernize their databases, right?
Sure.
They have to become more transparent. And maybe you've heard about SongView, for example, which is between ASCAP and BMI.
We use it often.
And so they joined their databases. That's innovation in a sense. So I think innovation is happening on the technology side. Also, I just saw stats. We're looking at about 12 trillion performances now every year. Trillion with a T. That's 12 zeros.
Yeah.
Between video and audio performances across all the DSPs and networks. And as you can imagine, handling this kind of data volume requires big data models. And so they have to innovate, but at the same time, and the company, that I'm working with now, Verified Media, which we can talk about as well, they don't want to be fully transparent for a number of reasons. The competitive reasons, of course. But it's kind of a little bit of a fine line, as you would say, in terms of how far they can go, how innovative they can be. I think it's also internal dynamics, to be quite honest. There are teams within those PROs that are more innovative than others. There are teams that are resisting change. There are other teams that are open to change. But it's a slow-moving target, right? So
not built for change.
No, think about like an oil tanker reversing course. It's a very, very slow process. But as we see more competition, by the way, in the marketplace, I mean, GMR is now almost 10 years old. You have companies like Unison in Spain. You have kind of tech heavy. You have AMRA, which is Cobalt's subsidiary, only digital, right? So there's a lot of innovation in that space that sort of increases pressure on those incumbent companies to actually innovate. So it's going to be interesting to see, but I think we're seeing very, very small and slow movements.
Talk, explain GMR.
So
Irving Azoff's.
Irving Azoff.
Let's unpack that a little bit, because I think it's really interesting what him and his team are doing there.
So they're based out of LA, right? Irving Azoff is one of the top music managers, and he's also he owned part of the Madison Square Garden venues, superstar artists, right? I mean, you can look it up. It's a pretty elaborate catalog. So he got together with Randy Grimmett, I think his name, who was one of the executives at ASCAP, and Sean Malley from the membership team to create their own PRO, because he thought, he was very vocal actually, and he was not wrong to say that.
And he was responsible for the Eagles. I think he managed Van Halen, kind of like A-level top 2%.
Top. Yeah, exactly. And so, he didn't like the consent decree. He didn't like the regulatory framework. He was very vocal about saying that, rates are oppressed. It's all crazy. The radio stations should pay a lot higher rates. And he was not wrong about a lot of these things. So they decided to become a boutique bureau, right? Really focusing on a handful, hundreds of artists, a very small group of artists. Yeah. BMI, as a reference, has more than 1 million affiliates, right?
Yeah.
ASCAP has about 1 million affiliates. And so GMR, very small. You can look up the catalog. They know exactly what they own. They have a handful of artists and really
it's the icons, it's the legends, it's
exactly
top 1% of all artists.
That's it. And it's both catalog and new releases. So it's pretty significant. Their market share is, single digits, but it's significant enough so that they can go to Facebook and say, hey, you guys need to license us, or to YouTube and to radio stations say, by the way,
and they license directly with them. Like they negotiate the deal for the
exactly.
Eagles. Right.
For the entire catalog. It's a similar approach where you have a blanket license that includes their entire catalog. And they're not bound by any regulation. They're not bound by consent decrees. So most importantly, they can say no. So if somebody comes to them and asks for a license and they don't like the terms, they can deny that license.
They can walk.
Exactly. With BMI cannot do that. You can send a license request to BMI and say, hey, I want to license your catalog. BMI and ASCAP, they don't have the ability to say no. They have to license.
Right.
And then they start, negotiating the terms.
Yeah.
In
and that's what's called,
case,
that's like a willing buyer, willing seller relationship. Like if you're going to buy my house, we need to agree on the deal, which is kind of fair, right?
Exactly. Except with GMR, as you can imagine, they have pretty high leverage, right? Because they can dictate the terms. If they don't like the terms, they can say, okay, we're going to sue you.
Yeah.
They let the judge decide, which they did a bunch of times. They sued the radio industry, the entire radio industry, the RMLC, the Radio Music Licensing Committee. They've sued individual players. They've sued gyms and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And, of course, the rates that they're seeking are much, much, much higher than, the equivalent rates you would see at BMI ASCAP, right?
Yeah.
And then the selling point for the artists, they managed to actually poach a lot of writers and artists to come mostly from ASCAP, but also from BMI. And it also takes time because their license is in effect and all these kind of things. But they were pretty successful in convincing those artists to come over for a number of reasons. One is that they could offer a much more transparent payout system, where if you're an artist, for example, you have the number of streams, the per play rates, all these kind of, maybe you get in advance, right? So it's capital intensive for sure.
Right.
But they were able to incentivize those artists to leave the large PROs at that time.
Yeah. Interesting. So it's kind of like cherry picking.
Exactly right. And in the beginning, it was tough to get licenses in place. It was mostly flat fee deals, like they would settle with large, platforms for, let's say, a 2-year deal on a flat fee basis. But since then, I think they've become much more sophisticated, and they're now kind of more into formulaic rev share deals as well.
Yeah.
But think about they're really taking advantage of the system, right? Which is the fact that they're not regulated.
Hey, everybody, just wanted to drop in again and say thanks to our sponsor, the Sync Center. The Sync Center is trusted by Fortune 50 companies, filmmakers, ad executives, networks, major film and streaming studios. The Sync Center is a full-service music supervision and licensing company that has managed projects for clients including national and global brands, ad agencies, and cultural events. They specialize in getting you the music you want within the budget you have, all while keeping you legal through the whole process. You can check them out at thesynccenter.com. That's THESYNCCENTER.com. Check them out. So as GMR is kind of taking a smart approach to top tier artists and kind of cherry picking them from ASCAP and BMI, where does, for BMI, and they've been in the news over the last couple months of potentially being acquired. What are your thoughts on that conversation?
My own personal thoughts.
yeah, or professionally and personally.
Well,
I mean, it's an interesting, it's an interesting potential scenario to come out of this.
Yeah, let's just take a step back and sort of explain what actually happened, right? So, in most people's minds, ASCAP and BMI are non-for-profit companies that run their businesses on what's called an expense ratio. So they collect money and they take a certain percentage to run the business, right? To keep the lights on, to pay their employees, to pay the rent and all that stuff. And so these publicly, available ratios are around 13-14% of their collections is used to run their business, right?
Which is pretty fair.
It's lower. It's not bad. I mean, if you think about how expensive it is to license bars and restaurants, go out there and you have to have a sales force. I mean, it actually costs money to get these licenses in place and to enforce them and to distribute. I would say it's pretty fair. But that's the general understanding is they're non-for-profit companies.
Right.
Whatever they take in, they pay out, let's say, 86% to the songwriters and publishers. And as you know, 50% goes to the songwriters, 50% goes to the publishers directly, which is it's a little bit different from mechanical licensing, where it goes to the publishers first.
Right.
And so recently, in the last couple of years, they have announced that they want to become a for-profit company. First of all, there was kind of some rumors around them trying to get sold, right, to an investor, to a private equity company, and then those initial talks fell apart. Then they announced they're now becoming a for-profit company, which is interesting because how can you just switch gears? But it's important to note that when they used to be a non-for-profit company, they were never set up like a 501c3 or a traditional non-for-profit company. They were always set up with a cap table, shareholders, which in this case were broadcasters, and a system where it's at their discretion, essentially, what they take as an expense ratio. They may also take some reserves. It's at their discretion, right? How they use these proceeds, and actually, frankly, how they pay out on the distribution side as well. So they were never really set up as a non-for-profit
501.
company. They just acted as one, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
That's important to know.
And I think it's also important to say, Michael, too, it's like we've got friends and partners at ASCAP and BMI. This is nothing negative about ASCAP or BMI or CSAC. I mean, they make us money. We love what they're doing, but there's an interesting macro thing that's happening that I think deserves some attention that maybe kind of gets glossed over with some of the bells and whistles and noise. So yeah, keep going. Tell me.
And so now they decided, okay, without we're for a profit company, they even announced a profit. I think it was like 150 million on like 1.5 billion in collections, so like a 10% profit margin. Nobody knows where that profit margin comes from because they still have to pay rent, and that's about the same amount of money that is kind of the expense overhead for like a year. So I'd be curious to actually see if any songwriters that are BMI affiliated have seen any differences. I think I've seen indications that they haven't, that the payouts are still going out the way they used to. So it's still TBD where that profit actually came from, but that's a different topic, right? But they're now set up as a for-profit company, meaning they can now make investments. They can expand internationally, for example. They can
still under the consent decree, though.
Under the consent decree, they're still under the consent decree, so they can't get higher rates. right? That's also very important to know. So whoever buys them should understand that there's still this like cap we talked about in terms of rates. So the consent decree is not going away. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. But they're now set up as a for-profit company, and now we've heard rumors that they may be sold to a private equity company for a price that is a little higher than 1x of their annual revenues, right? I think we've seen numbers like 1.7 billion or something like that floating around.
Just 1x.
Yeah, 1 point something x, right?
Huh.
But think about this though. I mean, their revenues are really only their expense ratio, because the rest goes back to the songwriters and publishers.
Right.
So if you really think about it, it's kind of a 12x of what they now call profit.
Yeah.
Well, when you look at collections, it'd be like 1.2x their annual collections, basically. And it's interesting, right? I mean, we're still, I think, in the due diligence phase. It's still not finalized. So I think they have an exclusive, as far as I understand, with a potential buyer, and they're like kicking the tires now. Yeah. So nothing has been set in stone. And of course, the songwriting community is asking a lot of questions. I'm saying like, hey, we've built this value to you guys. You would have nothing without our catalogs. What do we get out of this, right? So there are a lot of open questions, to be quite honest. If I had a crystal ball, unfortunately, I would probably say that the songwriters would get little to nothing, because they're simply not shareholders of the company.
Mm-hmm. Hey, everybody, it's John. Just wanted to drop in here and give a special thanks to our sponsor, ArtistWorks. ArtistWorks is an execution company. They specialize in media, marketing, and monetization. ArtistWorks partners with brands to provide infrastructure, marketing, execution, and monetization in the rapidly changing media industry. They create products and experiences to engage your customers, drive revenue, build careers, and surpass your competitors. Check them out at artistworks.com. That is works with a W-E-R-X. ArtistWerx.com.
And so if you go back in time, why BMI even exists, right? The year was
broadcasters.
Yeah, so the year was 1939, when Second World War started. By the way, look over here. A great time to launch a performing rights organization. And it was in response to what I mentioned with ASCAP, where ASCAP was trying to gouge the marketplace, essentially. And the broadcasters, to your point, John, got together and they said, hey, you know what? Screw you, ASCAP. We're going to start our own performing rights organization. We're going to have open door policy, because ASCAP was very limited in terms of genre. As you probably know, it was all Tin Pan Alley writers. They didn't allow any
blues,
African-American writers. They didn't allow blues. They didn't allow jazz.
At ASCAP.
It's a racist organization.
At ASCAP.
At ASCAP.
Right. Yeah. But and BMI focused on the blues, race records from,
Exactly. And they had what's called the open door policy. They accepted everybody.
Right.
Like if you're a songwriter, come on in. It's free to affiliate.
Right.
You don't discriminate. And that was kind of their selling point. But in my mind, it's
a disruptor.
They were disruptor, exactly. But isn't it a little curious that a customer would own, or a licensee would start a company that is a licensor at the same time that that they need to pay license fees to?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is it a little bit of a conflict of interest that the broadcasters who are the ones who have to pay for the music all of a sudden own the licensing organization that negotiates these licenses?
Yeah.
Absolutely. A little curious, but I mean, I can tell you though from my time, that you wouldn't know it in the day-to-day business, right?
Yeah.
I think it was typically a pretty fair negotiation. But there are definitely open questions in my mind why they set up this company. It looked like a conflict of interest.
Yeah. So, Michael, the for-profit switch for BMI, fair to say that that's a precursor to a potential acquisition for investors? Like an investor isn't gonna
that
isn't going to buy a
exactly,
501c.
that's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, and plus, BMI doesn't really own any copyrights, right?
Right.
So when you look at the affiliation agreements, which means the agreements with the publishers and the songwriters, they're non-exclusive. First of all, they're always free to leave, and even when they're under contract, they can license directly to, let's say, a radio station like C100 or even to Meta or Instagram. So they're non-exclusive agreements, and they don't own any copyrights.
Yeah.
So what are they really buying? So they're
Operations,
buying
the
operations,
relationships.
and exactly, and there has to be kind of a profit, right? Otherwise, it's not really attractive for buyers. I call it kind of window dressing.
Yeah.
I think that's
so. Michael, who do you think? You mentioned private equity firms, and there's a lot of nameless type private equity firms. Who would be the strategic acquirer for someone like a BMI? What goes through your head as like who would be a smart acquirer?
Well, you see a lot of these companies like BlackRock and others that are actually investing in catalogs. Blackstone, KKR,
Bain.
Bain, exactly. There are people who are now investing in hypnosis. In this case, we know that there's rumors that New Mountain Capital is actually the ones that are looking at BMI exclusively. I think somebody who is also a catalog investor, right? Who has dealings in music copyrights, but who's not a traditional music player.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're seeing a lot of that now in the catalog acquisition world, just where private equity and some of like mid-level buyers like Catch Points and others that are entering the fray, or pension funds that are now interested in acquiring music copyrights. And a lot of them that are non-traditional players actually partner with music companies, whether it's like KKR and a DMG or Blackstone, that they partner with music companies because they don't have the know-how.
Right.
So I think
they're the money, and then the hands-on technical day-to-day.
Exactly. And wouldn't it be great if you owned copyrights to also have a company that administers those copyrights and actually licenses those copyrights? Right?
At that point, you're a indie in-house global company.
Exactly.
So, Michael, question for you on the private equity plays that are going on over the last 3 or 4 years. There's you mentioned KKR, Bain, BlackRock, pension funds, Canadian pension funds. Obviously they're paying massive amounts for high value catalogs, meaningful Nile Rodgers, Bob Dylan type catalogs. What do you think? Who benefits here?
Well, it's interesting, and actually, I'm working closely with some of these guys, so I have to be careful what I can disclose here. But the investment
generally
thesis,
speaking,
the investment thesis really is that music copyrights are a non-correlated asset, meaning that if the economy tanks, there is for those of you who are investors, like the beta, which is the correlation between the market itself and the asset, is relatively low. So the market could tank, but music copyrights could do still pretty well. And we've actually seen it during the pandemic, to be quite honest. The whole world shut down. Live Nation, of course, the live guys, they were out of luck. A lot of people went out of business, but streaming went on. We had some really interesting shifts from, of course, new releases more towards catalog and some shifts in genres, but music consumption never slowed down. And actually, both on the recorded music side and the music publishing side, which is largely driven by streaming now or by digital, including TikTok and short video, it was proven that it was not really correlated with the marketplace, where, in 2020, it tanked pretty significantly, right? When you look at kind of the NASDAQ and the Dow. And so that's one thing, is it's a non-correlated equity investment, but it's also kind of a little bit of a mix between equity and fixed income. because with a music catalog, you get residuals, you get, almost like a coupon payment, you would say, in the bond world. And it's very, very predictable. So if you look at the models, and you have a catalog, let's say, that's not a current hit, but maybe 2-3 years old to 7 years old, you can predict pretty accurately what's going to happen in, let's say, 2 to 3 years.
It's already had its peak, and now it's leveled off.
Right. It's leveled off, and it's kind of not necessarily evergreen, but it's catalog now, and it's on certain playlists, and it's there to stay, and people use it for their TikTok videos and things like that. Overall, when you look at an entire catalog like that, it's relatively easy to predict. Not easy, but it's possible to predict the performance with relative certainty in a very narrow band. Because, subscriptions are going to increase. You look at folks like Goldman Sachs who track the market. There's certain known unknowns, there's certain unknown unknowns, but there are a lot more known unknowns in the sense that you can predict the macro trends of music and revenues, and then you can predict kind of a specific catalog's performance. And they're really good, people that do the valuations and model out these things, and therefore it's a relative safe bet. Yeah. You also have copyright protection. You talked about the mechanical, which is statutory, meaning the rates are set by law. It just came out of the last 115 negotiations, and the rates are up. That's great news for songwriters. So those things are all predictable.
Right.
That's why it's a very attractive asset class for people who are looking at diversified portfolios. And the other thing is that, you look back at kind of the early days of catalog investments. Remember the 90s and the Bowie bonds.
Yeah.
David Bowie basically securitized his catalog and basically, got sort of has loaned against it.
Yeah.
It kind of didn't work out that well, but it was kind of unique.
It was early.
It was for everybody broke even as early, but now we have this asset class established with players like Hypnosis, their $2 billion company. They've established this really as now as an asset class that people can invest in. You have retail investment platforms coming in like Jukebox. Maybe you heard about Jukebox, Scott Cohen's new company.
Yeah.
Maybe you heard about companies like Songvest that now enable individual investors to acquire not necessarily copyrights, but economic interests in royalty streams.
Yeah.
And so as kind of you're maturing that kind of model, it becomes a lot more predictable. It's relatively safe. The SEC has kind of put their name behind a lot of these investment vehicles. So there's a lot of opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And that's why you've seen these kind of crazy valuations.
Yeah, 25 times earnings. I mean,
exactly on the net publishing side, net publishing earnings, exactly,
which is astronomical.
It's
crazy. Great. It's great for the writer and the family estate. I mean, what you just said is a fantastic summary for the private equity pension funds. Like, it makes sense, right? They're going to benefit, right? They're not in the business of losing money. And I've got friends in private equity venture firms. I've worked at venture firms. So not negating the value of venture capital in those relationships. But these are largely nostalgia legacy catalogs. Like, they've been proven 30, 40, 50 years. What is that? I mean, it's great for Bob Dylan's family estate. It's great for Jim Peterick from Eye of the Tiger, and when they sell their catalog. But what does it do? It seems to me like the pension fund benefits and the family estate benefits, and the next artist coming up, not so much. That money's taken out of a Sony or a Universal or a Garth Brooks company or a Big Loud Shirt. That money's extracted from the company, and it's, how do you pay for the next Garth Brooks or the next Taylor Swift or up and comer? It's like it seems to me like they're kind of thrown under the bus.
Yeah, but you see also the labels making big bets, right? You saw Bruce Springsteen being acquired by Sony, and you see things where I think Warner, what was it, Major Tom, who's the guy I'm thinking about. So the labels are in that game as well. So they're competing, with all these institutional investors and non-traditional investors.
Yeah.
For different reasons, because for them, the issue we have on the label and publishing side is that they don't speak to each other.
Right.
They're kind of very hostile environments. So
Different assets, different IP.
different IP, and but under the same corporate umbrella. But what you see now in terms of licensing opportunities with platforms like Splice and Stems and sample marketplaces and more interactive things, and AI, of course, coming in, is that you need to pool all the rights together with the IP to actually enter into these license agreements, right? So, for example, one thing at Warner, I was trying to find out is what's the actual overlap of fully owned, we call them wholly owned catalogs between recorded music and music publishing. So we can actually go out and enter into innovative agreements. Guess what? They don't actually know that. And so that's one of the reasons why they're looking very surgically at specifically acquiring, let's say, publishing rights for an artist where they may not administer the publishing, or, you know, and that's why they're also playing big bets. So I wouldn't count them out, but it's certainly become much more competitive. And the labels they had to really switch gears, and I think switch their risk model as well. As they have to kind of compete and bid for the same, in a lot of the cases, for the same catalog. But I mean, they already own a significant catalog, right? So most of the catalogs are sold by individual songwriters, not necessarily the large, publishing companies or the large recorded music companies. So they already have, I mean, between the three majors, 70% market share on at least in the Anglo-American place. So I wouldn't be too worried about that.
Yeah.
But
well, my concern is for the, like, when I came up in the 90s, there were developmental deals. Now those are gone. Publishers, labels expect artists to come fully formed, their business intact, have some there, right? It's really a joint venture model now, Publishers and labels are joint venturing with the artists. So
that's very true.
As we work with artists who are kind of crossing the chasm from a developing artist into a deploying and a dominating artist, it's like there's a lot of work that gets thrown onto the artist that, and even in the 90s, and that's just a few years ago, it's like labels used to develop things. Now it's like they're very much taking that venture capital approach. It's like growth capital. They'll pour gas on the fire when it's burning to, light up the sky. Yeah. But they're not going to rub sticks together.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Which historically they have done, right?
Yeah.
That artist development, that they had patience, right? If the first album didn't do well,
Jackson Browne was like 3 or 4 records in before he broke.
Exactly. There are a lot of these examples. So to your point, they don't have that patience anymore.
Yeah.
And they're looking at what's already there, right?
Yeah.
You have what's your fan base? What's your product? Do you have a finished product? Where are you touring? How many people can you get to your live gigs? Right? All these stats that are available.
It's B2B.
Exactly. Yeah. And
those are B2B questions. Like, are we going to do a joint venture? There has to be some there.
That's it. But at the same token, so that left kind of a void, right, that you are now filling, and that I think there's real opportunity there. And you're seeing the independent distributors, for example, like Downtown or CD Baby or an AWOL that was acquired by Sony, actually being more in that space of hand-holding and sort of trying to form an artist career that is not yet fully formed. Right. And I think the labels recognize that. That's why they're placing bets, right? I mentioned AWOL that was acquired by Sony. Warner has KDA, which is kind of their independent artist services. But there's certainly a void. They definitely left a void there. And I think that's what they're trying to get stronger on is this, we call it the A&R funnel, which is, you detect talent early and you actually develop it, right? You help them shape their voice, their image, and sort of, you help them grow. And then when the time is right, maybe you bubble them up to major, like an Epic record or Atlantic record. And I think they're struggling with that. They're certainly making bets, they're placing bets and mostly making investments in that space. So fill that gap. But I mean, companies like yours, that's where real opportunity lies.
We're having a blast.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Hey, everybody. Just wanted to drop in again and say thanks to our sponsor, the Sync Center. The Sync Center is trusted by Fortune 50 companies, filmmakers, ad executives, networks, major film and streaming studios. The Sync Center is a full-service music supervision and licensing company that has managed projects for clients including national and global brands, ad agencies, and cultural events. They specialize in getting you the music you want within the budget you have, all while keeping you legal through the whole process. You can check them out at thesyncenter.com. That's TheSyncCenter.com. Check them out. So, Michael, tell me kind of what your day-to-day is now. You said you're working. Tell us about the new company you're working with.
Yeah, so I have a bunch of clients that I work with under my consulting umbrella. But one of my main clients is Verify Media. I'm very actually excited about them. I joined them about 2 years ago now, running all the business development efforts. So it started out as a blockchain company, actually. Maybe remember .bc, music.bc, Benji Rogers and those guys. We had Warner Music early on. That was kind of before my time, 7 years ago. It's all about data collaboration. So the music business is still a mess when it comes to what I call data fluency. Right? When you compare it, let's say, with other industries like the healthcare industry, Nashville, right, or the finance industry, data sharing is imperative. You can't survive if American Express doesn't have data exchange with Chase Bank or something. Yeah, and so, but in the music industry, we kind of get away with having silos. We mentioned about BMI, ASCAP. Now they have SongView, but that's just 2 out of 200 in the world. PRS in the UK is doing their own thing, right? SACEM is doing their own thing. That's just PROs. Now you're talking about publishers, sub-publishers, you're talking about labels and artists, and every one of those entities is a silo, essentially.
Yeah.
They invest in their own database. They don't really exchange data. And as a result, in a lot of cases, when we have a new release going on Spotify, which you probably know, I think that number is already outdated, but the last number is 120,000 songs a day get now published in Spotify.
Yeah,
in a lot of cases, you don't have all the songwriters. You don't have the ISWC, which is the identifier for the song. You don't have the affiliation with the PROs. So you have half-baked metadata, we call it, which is the descriptive data of ownership when the song is commercially released, right? And you multiply that by 150 million songs that is currently on Spotify. Simple things like, okay, let's identify new recordings. Could be cover version, could be another mix or something of that has the work underlying. We don't know these things, right?
Yeah.
We're always lagging behind, and as a result, we have black box, unfortunately, crazy amount of black box money that can't be distributed to the proper owners, the songwriters and publishers. Of course, now we have the MLC, but that's just in the United States, where they have a mandate to figure out who to actually pay to reduce that black box revenue. But between Sound Exchange, between all the DSPs in the world, we have many billions of black box revenues that is currently sitting there because they don't know who the rightful owners are for those royalties.
Change of address, contact information. I mean, basic stuff.
Or catalog sales, right? Things like that. And so the Verify approach is basically that of collaboration. So we're bringing in labels, publishers, DSPs, bureaus to, in a very controlled fashion, share data. And then they have access to our composite data layer, which combines all these stats. So we combine the ISRC, the ISWC, we find IPI affiliation, songwriter information, all based mostly on first-party data, augmented by third-party data where there's no first-party data available. So that's the idea.
Interesting. So it's almost like a credit rating, like it's a layer that's always being updated and corrected.
Funny you should say that.
Credit report type thing.
That's exactly the right idea. So we have what's called a validation score, and that's exactly like a credit rating. So if we look at a catalog and there's artists, title track, songwriters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, publishers, bureaus, we validate that existing data set. And if, let's say, we're confident, there's a confidence level of 1, that's the truth as we know it today. And sort of this confidence level, we call it a score. Data score is exactly like a credit score. And so the higher it is, the more confident we are, and the more confident the shareholders can be that the information is correct. Let's say if it's 0.8, and we just here you're just the messenger, right? If you want a music, maybe you're okay with 0.8, little uncertainty, but you're kind of accepted. So the business rules are kind of the second step. What do you do with it, right? With the credit rating of 650, do I give you a mortgage or not? That's up to the lender. But we're exactly doing that. We're providing this validation score, which is like a credit score. So
is that both sides of the copyright, master and publishing?
Yes.
Okay,
exactly.
interesting.
And it's connecting both sides. And as you also point out, it's an iterative process. So over time, these scores go up and up and up.
Right. Yeah, I love that. Interesting, Michael. That's great, man. Well, Michael, this has been great, man. I could. There's a whole nother conversation to have on some of the AI stuff that's going on and metadata and Web3. So maybe we can jump back on in the coming months to continue the conversation.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm at this music industry conference today in Brooklyn called Mondo. And they have, it's a really well attended this year. All the majors are here, and who's who of the industry. But they have a specific track just for AI, and it's really interesting. So that's definitely what keeps people keeps executives awake at night.
It's interesting. Never
awesome, dull moment.
Yeah, really, man, Michael. It's great to update with you and talk about what you're seeing and what you're working on. Thank you so much for jumping in and talking to the hacking music community about what you're seeing and what you're excited about. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us.
Thanks, John, for having me.
Absolutely.
Cheers, everyone. All right. Take care.
Welcome to Hacking Music. I'm your host, John Pisciotta. The goal of this podcast is to break off a piece of the hacking music training we use and train artists in every day to master the best of what other headliner artists have already figured out so that you can unlock your potential. Additionally, we interview world-class artists and entrepreneurs, doers and thinkers so that you can better analyze your problems, seize your opportunities, and master your decision-making and execution. Every episode is packed with training, lessons, and force multipliers that never expire. And if you're listening to this, you're missing out. If you'd like members-only training and exclusive content, you can join at hacking-music.com. Check out the show notes for a link. This episode is brought to you by the Sync Center, trusted by Fortune 50 companies, filmmakers, ad executives, and major film studios. The Sync Center is a full-service music supervision and licensing company that has managed projects for hundreds of clients, including national and global brands, agencies, and cultural events.